Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Plant Engineering Workshop 2020 keynote. My name is Javier Blasco. I'm the General Chairman of the Plant Engineering Workshop. As you all know, this is the third edition of the Plant Engineering Workshop. The two previous editions were held in Madrid in 2016, 2018. And of course, this year it had to be moved to an online event. So we hope that all of you enjoy this keynote and enjoy the workshop. We have packed it with wonderful seminars for your convenience. The seminars are pre-recorded, so you just watch them when you have some time. And then the interaction will be carried out through either the Telegram bot application or through the website that we sent you. Okay, so without further ado, I just let the keynote speaker, Raquel Chamochín, to go ahead with her speech. And of course, we thank you, her, for being so kind to accept our invitation for this keynote. Okay, Raquel, so if you want to proceed, maybe a short introduction of yourself, and then proceed with your keynote. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks to you, Javier. Thanks to the Plant Engineering Workshop for inviting me to this keynote. I also want to thank Javier Tirenti for thinking on me to work with you today. Well, I'm an industrial engineer. I have 12 years of experience working for technical support of offshore and onshore wind farms. But lately, I refocused my career to a more strategic area on Iberdrola company in climate change and energy policies direction in the German area. And I'm going to drive my speech today about these topics. And well, when I started to prepare it some months ago, by February, something like this, things were very different, you know. We started to listen about something that was happening in China was coming, started in Italy, and well, the COVID came and has been a big boom. Everything has changed a lot. And now, my slides are not... And the COVID came and everything has changed a lot. In this year, in this 2020, energy demand has dropped 5%, and energy investment has dropped 18% due to the stoppage of the demand, to the economic uncertainties. And not only in this more working aspect, but also our social life is different now. The way that we collaborate at work is also different, and this online workshop, it's a good example of it. So many things during these years has been under question. Things that were considered that are going to be immutable are right now being rethinking. And some questions as, for instance, is economy more important than health, are raised right now on the table. Is biodiversity so important to protect us against this zoonotic illness that are coming more often? How long is going to take the lockdown on? Are going to be able to afford this complex process to fight against the COVID? And well, all these things are right now on the table. COVID has been a rupture. We have to rethink and rebuild our world. And we are going to tiptoe over the energy policies, over the cutting edge technologies and energy trends in the following years during this speech. But let me start on another important determinant on the energy trends, which is climate change. Okay, so COVID has been a big wave that has moved and has made us to rethink a lot many things. The economic recession that is coming is going to be very hard to deal with, but climate change, I have to say, it's something even bigger, and it's going to put many questions on the policymakers in order to deal with the consequences that it may bring. But why climate change is so important? Why is so important to deal with it? And if climate system is a dynamic system that has been always changing, why it's so different now? Why it's making the difference? From my point of view, it's on one hand because it's faster and bigger than ever before. In this graph, you can see the CO2 concentration during the last 8,100 years. And in this part, I'm going to, sorry, because I'm going to use the laser, but sorry, I cannot use the laser. In the last part of the graph, you can see how it has increased and how different is compared with anything before. The situation now is completely different, and nature needs time to adapt themselves to these changes. In fact, well, many of the resources that we are using right now came from 1,000 years ago. Oil or gas that we are using now needed huge amounts of forest and thousands of years to be developed. The biodiversity where we look for some medicines needed thousands of years to increase the complexity and to create the complex system. So nature needs time, and they cannot. It's not able to face this fast change. But the point is that it's not only the natural system that are not able to face these fast changes, but also human systems has some problems to do that. We cannot change our houses to one place, from one place to another if one flood is coming. We cannot change our infrastructures from one place to another in case of the resources that we are using are not available anymore. Now we are seeing some people which is called climate displaced, and it's people that is moving inside their own countries, trying to save their lives because of extreme weather events. And when we think on climate displaced, an image like this came to our minds, or an image like this. But we have to know that there are people like this, people in Australia that are having important problems to face with water scarcity due to the consequences of climate change. There in the Murray Basin, in the southeast of Australia, there's such a water scarcity problem that the bitter disputes has taken place between residents, between farmers, between environmentalists, and between politicians too. So this is something that is happening now, and we have to take into account. And also, from my point of view, the other important aspect of climate change is that this is global. We are going to see these consequences everywhere. And if we consider that we are right now almost 8,000 million people living in the earth, and it is projected that we will be something between 9.5 and 11 in 2050, this means that we are going to need all resources in the earth to be able to live. We cannot afford to lose any drop of water. We cannot afford to lose any hectare of land to cultivate or to grow a forest or to have our houses. We cannot lose any amount of energy. We are going to need anything, especially if we want a sustainable world, if we want a comfortable home in a sustainable city, if we want a good job, if we want a good quality of education for our children and for all the children in the world, if we want no poverty or hunger, and even if we want to protect the environmental life on land and in water, we need to rethink the way that the decisions are being taken. And of course, so this is a very difficult problem. It's not a one-phase problem. It's a three-phase problem that should be resolved. And okay, we have to take into account the economy aspects. It's important to grow the economy. It's important, of course, a solid economy in order to be able to develop other aspects. But we have also to take into consideration the impact of our decisions in the societies where the companies in we work or in the countries in we live. The impact that is having in the societies that are affected by our actions, okay? And also, it is important to consider the environmental aspects because there are some natural resources that won't last forever, that needs to be exploited in a sustainable way. And the key to be able to take into account these three phases problem and deal with it from a global point of view, because all the countries in the world has to be in this conversation, in this discussion, it's diplomacy. I think that we can be happy because luckily there has been a lot of bureaucracy work has already been done. There are good organizations, good job that has already been done. Here I show you some of the important COPs that has already took place. IPCC, it's the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. It's a group of thousands of scientists that contribute with their job to analyze the climate system, to analyze how it is changing, to analyze what can be the consequences, and to analyze how can be avoided. This group of scientists release reports every 5 years, more or less, and typical document of 600 pages, something like this. But luckily, they also release a summary for policymakers where they highlight important notes to the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Frameworks Convention on Climate Change, which is a more political organization where decisions are taken. So they take this summary for policymakers plus economy, plus social, plus industrial, plus development, etc., other consideration, these three phases, put all of them together and try to start to define the world rules in order to keep on developing, but with a lower impact to the environment or to the climate change in this case, in this specific case. So we are in a good point. I'm pretty sure that all of you knows about Kyoto Protocol. Was this protocol started in force 15 years ago, or even more, but it has good results. It's difficult, but it's an example of things can be done and agreements taken. And in fact, a good one is a Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement was adopted in COP21 in Paris in 2015, and it was a really historic milestone. It was so important because 189 countries ratified it. You know why I put the asterisk? Is because US is now reconsidering to be a part of this agreement. Final decision will be taken by next November the 4th. But well, at that time, almost all countries in the world ratified this agreement, and all of them commit with reductions in the greenhouse gases emissions. So that's complete a revolution in this kind of meetings, because it was very important. Of course, details has to be totally defined, but they're on the good way. In that agreement, it was set a long-term goal, which was to keep the rise of average temperature of the Earth well below 2 degrees, or even if possible, 1.5 degrees. What this means? It means that temperature of the Earth is well linked to the carbon concentration or CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. So if you want to keep the temperature below certain level, you have to keep greenhouse gases emissions below certain level. And in fact, taking into account that this process has an inertia, you need to reduce the amount of emissions that you are releasing. Okay, this is what it means, the 2 degrees. Well, there are two ways to fight against climate change. On one hand, mitigation. Mitigation is the way these commitments that countries are assuming in order to reduce their greenhouse gases emissions, and also adaptation. Adaptation means that right now there are some consequences of climate change that are unavoidable. Right now we are going to see change in patterns. We are going to see change in rain patterns, or increase in temperature, increase in summer storms. And what we have to do, or what it was agreed in Paris, it's that the countries will prepare adaptation plans and collaboration between countries in order to face this problem. Okay, going back to mitigation, maybe you have heard something about Article 6. Article 6 is a loose end that is still pending to close from Paris Agreement. And this one, it's quite difficult because it's not related to the commitments that every country do, but it's related to how these commitments are put all together, how are they measured, and which kind of economical mechanisms are going to put on the table to control these commitments. And well, you know, when money is in the discussion, it's becoming more difficult. If we have to take into account the different backgrounds of the countries that are included in the discussion, it's causing so many headaches to the politicians that are in this discussion, because imagine that you have to reach an agreement between Brazil, with all their forest, and a country which is under development but has a lot of forest and renewables energy. You have to put this country, reach an agreement with Poland, for instance, where they have a lot of coal, which is a fuel right now like taboo. Okay, you have to reach an agreement between them. You have to reach an agreement between Germany and China that has nothing to do together. So imagine how difficult it is And in the end, the agreement that finally is reached has to be a win-win. In this case, a win-win-win-win-win-win, 189 times win to all the countries if we want to this work. So this is taking time. I hope that in next COP in Glasgow next year, we have an improvement on this. Okay, so I would like to do to use this example, this breakwater example, to explain how climate change can be fight. In Paris Agreement, we have said that there are some adaptation rules, there are some mitigation rules. Thinking on this example, we have a breakwater, and imagine a big wave is coming, and you have your boats at the other part, and you're worried about it. So for risk management, there is a bow tie diagram that are used to be focused on the causes, to be focused on the consequences. Okay, in this case, we can try to reduce this wave that is coming. It's called mitigation actions, and it's to prevent this risk to happen, this event to happen. And what can we do for that? We can reduce greenhouse gases emissions, but not only in Europe. Europe, you know, is really high commitment with the greenhouse gases reduction, but it's not only Europe, it's the whole world who has to do this commitment, because no matter CO2 came from, it's causing a global problem. Okay, so that's why the solutions have to be thought at global scale. And that's why we have to think in long term, because this process takes time and we have to reduce the amount of emission. The problem, is not so easy that if we stop emitting now, the problem is fixed. No, we have to change the trends that we already have in order to fix this problem. And that's why we have this long-term, by the end of the century, this long-term goal, which is to keep temperature, if possible, below 1.5. And on the other hand, okay, we have mitigate the problem as much as possible, and this should be, this should have the most effort on that part. But there are some consequences that won't possible to avoid right now. And well, we have to reduce the vulnerability of our systems. We have to design the new infrastructures taking into account that maybe, I don't know, bigger storms will come or floods. So we have to include this kind of weather extreme events in the design of the facilities. We have to take into account the current variability, because this is not a long-term, this is a short-term problem. It's happening right now. And solutions has to be thought at local scale, because the consequences of climate change in Spain would be something like droughts or heater or hotter temperature. And maybe in Caribbean area, it's stronger storms, or in the islands, maybe they are worried about the ice, about the level rise. So in different areas, the solutions to adaptation should be different, because the consequences are different too. Good, so with all of these frame, with this COVID, with this climate change problem, with the policies, with the Paris Agreement, with this Article 6, that is like a difficult thing, a difficult stone to deal with it. Many countries are taking steps towards climate neutrality. Many countries are being brave, and many areas are taking commitments in order to fight against it and mitigate the problem that may worse in the future. For instance, Europe, Canada, or Japan has committed to be neutral by 2050. China has announced 3 weeks ago, something like this, in the New York Climate Week, they announced that they will be neutral by 2060. China, which is the first polluter in the world, they are China. It's emitting 20% of the emissions in the world. So they have committed to reduce to be neutral by 2060. So even considering that this is a country which an important development right now, but they are taking also commitments. And
Raquel,
yes.
May I interrupt? Can you define what is to be neutral in terms of that might be not everybody might know
clear,
that.
No? Okay, sorry. Climate neutral means that the emissions that for a country, in this case we are speaking about a country or a region, this means that the greenhouse gases emissions, not only CO2, but also methane or NO2, etc., other greenhouse gases, all of these greenhouse gases that are emitted are as minimum also captured by other things. I mean, in the end, you make a balance in between the greenhouse gases emissions that you are releasing with the greenhouse gases emissions that you are capturing mainly by forest or other artificial technologies. Okay, so balancing these two factors are zero. Okay, so you don't have any impact on the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. This is what it means. Okay.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Javier. There are a lot of details on this. Well, you know, it's not so easy. There are some complexities below or behind, but well, in general terms, it's something like this. Okay, the emissions that you are releasing minus the emissions that you are capturing, it gives you a zero. Okay, you are not having any footprint, any carbon footprint. Maybe you have heard about this expression. Okay, so how these countries, how are we going to achieve this? Speaking in the energy sector, on the first hand, it will be energy efficiency. It is needed to reduce the amount of energy that is needed to any process or to any system. But if we start to think on technologies, electrification is going to be an important lever to achieve this goal. Direct electrification, if we want to be climate neutral, if we want to have a zero carbon footprint, the target has to be 60% of the global energy need supplied by direct electrification. Direct electrification with renewables energy, or at least with carbon zero electricity. Okay. And the main uses that can be directly electrified, because it's easy, technically easy, it's transportation. It's also building, climatization of buildings, and also industry uses where the temperature demand is lower than 200 degrees. All of these uses can be electrified directly. And if we electrify directly with renewables or carbon zero emissions, we will have decarbonized sectors. Okay. Another advantage of electrification is that the resource is everywhere. The solar resource is everywhere, the wind resource is everywhere, there are some areas that have more solar resource, and there are some areas that have more wind resource or even hydro or other kind of renewables energies. But the good thing is that many countries can become more energy independent than they are right now. There are a lot of countries that have an important dependency of external fuels, and in crisis periods, it can have an impact on the balance of payments of the country. And with electrification, you become more independent and you have better control of your processes. And the other main technology, or the other, more than technology, the other energy vector that is finally coming, because I think hydrogen has been the eternal promise since, I don't know, 20 years, even more. I've been hearing about the hydrogen, and finally it's taking off. Finally, there are real projects of hydrogen under construction. And the hydrogen can be produced, or can come from different sources. The conventional one, let's say, it's coming from fossil fuels, natural gas, normally. And with a chemical process, you split the molecule, and you get the hydrogen, but also you get CO2. So, and the CO2 is released. So you are not having any improvement in terms of reduction of emissions. The blue hydrogen, it's the same process. You split the natural gas molecule into hydrogen and CO2, but then later what you do is to apply a carbon capture and storage technology to take this CO2 molecule and store it in a proper site. That normally, many times, it's in the same site where the natural gas came from, With this process of CCS, you can get an improvement, a reduction of 60 to 90% of CO2 reduction. But right now, the current technologies that are being used get a 60%. But with the improvements that are expected, you can get a 90% reduction of CO2, which is a good point. But you still have some part of these carbon emissions. And finally, green hydrogen. The process in this case, the source is water. And in this case, what you do is to split the water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen. In this case, there is no CO2 emissions. And the energy that you use to this process is electricity. So if in the box of the right, I explain a little bit more the water electrolysis. If you use renewable or non-carbon technologies to produce the electricity that you are using to the electrolysis process, you will get a zero carbon hydrogen. Where this hydrogen is used, there are, as I said, when it's possible, direct electrification is a good choice, because in this case you have to produce electricity and then you produce hydrogen with the yields that correspond to the processes. But there are some sectors that where direct electricity has not sense, as for instance aviation. There's a technical limitation for using direct electrification in aviation, because the batteries are so low that it's not possible to use them for aviation. Also, something similar happened with the shipment and in the energy, as for instance, steel energy, where the temperatures required are very high. Also, direct electricity has no sense. But with this another vector, you can get a decarbonized industry. Okay, so we have seen how the global policies are, how these cutting-edge technologies. Let's speak now about how the energy trends, how can we expect for the energy trends in the next years. Last week, the International Energy Agency released their annual report, the World Energy Outlook 2020, where they analyze the energy patterns, the energy paths that we can expect for the following years. In this case, in this 2020 report, they have focused their attention on this next decade, from 2020 to 2030, because of the COVID crisis, because of the pandemic, has changed totally the projections that they already have. And they have focused on trying to see which kind of impact it is going to have. In this slide, we can see, well, in the dot line, we can see what it was expected last year, or according to the last year projection, what it was expected. In the blue line, it's what you can see what had happened and what is expected if the policies that has already been approved starts on force. This is the trend of CO2 emissions that, as I said, is very linked to the temperature increase, and also it's very linked with the technology to produce the energy and with the amount of energy that we need, so efficiency and technologies. So blue line is what can we expect if only energy policies that are already approved enter in force. The orange one, it's related to, it's an analysis of what can happen if COVID pandemic of COVID crisis, it's deeper and longer than expected. Well, this is what they project if COVID crisis is longer. And the green one shows what should be the path of emissions if sustainable development policies are entered into force. So more ambitious policies are entered into force. If we want, in between, among others, if we want to commit with Paris Agreement, we have to follow the green line. Emissions have to follow the green line. Okay. So with this, okay, keep in your minds the blue one and the green one. What is going to happen with the fuels? How is going to be the fuel transition? Well, you can see coal, the brown line. Coal has already peaked. What they project is that it has already peaked. Even with the high demand of India, the rest of the world, the reduction of coal use in the rest of the areas is going to be more important. Coal is not is never going back to pre-pandemic values. Related to oil in the red line, you can see the red line and the red line on dots. Red line is for the stated policies scenario, so the things that are already approved. The line on dots, it's if we want to achieve the agreement, the Paris Agreement. Okay, so only thinking on the already approved policies, oil reached a plateau starting on 2030, something like this, where there is a balance between the reductions of oil consumption based on the efficiency, on the new technologies for transportation, and well, the impact of these climate policies, with a higher demand of plastic that make the petrochemical part increase a little bit. So there's a balance on that, and that's why the oil demand remain at the same level. Speaking about natural gas, what they expect is to have an important increase, mainly because of South and East Asia. They are the policies already approved put the accent on the air quality. You know, they have important problems of air quality in some areas in Asia, and they are trying to improve that, and that's why natural gas is helping them by removing carbon and using natural gas instead. They will have an improvement on that. And also considering that they are under development and in manufacturing. So that's why they expect in natural gas. And finally, the green line, it's related to low carbon fuels. Here I am speaking about hydrogen, but also a little bit about biofuels. Biofuels has also potential to remove some fossil fuels, but the point is that biofuels has a limited capacity because they enter in competition by land. They enter in competition of the uses of land with food. So it's something quite limited. And that's why biofuels could be used in optimized processes where there's no possible to go with electricity and where maybe hydrogen doesn't have sense. Biofuels will take this space, okay? And well, electricity in any of the scenarios will grow a lot, especially in the countries or in the area with more development expected, as China, Africa, India, etc. In European Union or United States, growth a bit, but not that much. And speaking about technologies, you can see how solar photovoltaic is the king, as the International Energy Agency says. This technology also with wind power, both onshore and offshore, has seen during the last 10 years an incredible reduce of the costs, reducing the cost of electricity production by 70%. And right now, this technology is generating electricity much cheaper than coal or oil in the most part of the countries of the world. So if you want to produce electricity, it has sense to go with these new technologies that are faster. The project is shorter because they are easier to build. And this helps also in terms of uncertainty of the projects. So because of this reason, that's why it is going to grow a lot. And yes, of course, oil companies are also in this same path. They know it, they see it, and they are taking their position too. There is an oil and gas climate initiative where many oil companies worldwide are taking their commitments, and they agree with, they explicitly support the Paris Agreement. So it means that they will to be carbon neutral as soon as possible. And in fact, there are some, the European companies are taking specific commitments on this carbon neutrality. As for instance, well, Shell or BP or Repsol, all of them has committed to be carbon neutral by 2050. This is difficult for these companies because I put a note at the bottom of the slide about the scope 1 and 2 and scope 3. What this means? It means that you can measure your footprint, your carbon footprint, the emissions that you are releasing, that these companies are releasing, are divided in 3 scopes. The first 2 ones are the scopes that are under the control of the company, direct control of the company. Okay, so these are the processes of the company. And they can control them and they can take decisions on them, and the emissions that are released, the methane emissions, for instance, that are released in their facilities can be compensated with carbon storage or with reforestation projects, so their carbon footprint is neutral. Okay, but the third scope is the hardest one and the bigger one, because it's the one that is not under their control. It's the footprint that is released because of the use of the products that they are producing. Okay, so all the gasoline, all the diesel, all the natural gas that is being used after these companies produce it is part of the scope that is assigned to these companies. And of course, with this, it is quite difficult to make this commitment, but they are on the way too. Well, in fact, I put this image here because this is the Repsol WindFloat Atlantic project. They are getting into wind offshore technology. Not only Repsol, but also BP and also Total. They are announcing a lot of important investments in this kind of technology in order to balance their technologies and to be able to achieve this carbon neutrality that they have committed to. And in the other way around, Iberdrola, in this case, it's also entering in this more fuels sector, but with the hydrogen. Iberdrola is building an important hydrogen plant in Puerto Llano. It will become the bigger in Europe when it enters in operation next year. It's a green hydrogen plant to provide with this material to Fertiberia. And well, the system, how it works, it is the energy comes from a photovoltaic power plant of 100 megawatts that supply energy to the electrolytic system, which is 20 megawatts, and then provide the hydrogen for Fertiberia. And it also has a battery to flatten the resource. You know, with the solar power plants, you have energy during the day and nothing during the night. So it is also using a battery in order to flatten the energy supply. And well, that's all from my part. I only can say that the trending topics for energy in this decade will be energy efficiency on the top of that. But then speaking on technologies, there will be renewables, especially solar photovoltaic. There will be hydrogen with the different colors of it. There will be carbon capture and storage, and also some part of biofuels. Well, thank you very much. I hope that you have liked it. And thank you, Javier. Thank you, the rest of the team of Plant Engineering Workshop, for giving me this chance. If you want to contact me, I think you can do it right now. I don't know if you have sent any question to me, or if not, by Telegram. No?
It can either be done by Telegram bot or there's also a web page. We have created a web page for those users who cannot install Telegram or just don't want to install Telegram. Okay. Raquel, first of all, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. It was very illustrative, eye-opening presentation. So it's you have my expectations were high, but you have even increased my expectations. Okay, so
thank
congratulations for your great presentation. I have written down some questions just to break the ice because now we can have some minutes of discussion. Blue hydrogen. It sounded to me a bit like nuclear. Because you have to store CO2, so you have. Is it? Am I right that blue hydrogen doesn't seem to be a good option?
Blue hydrogen has, well, on the first hand, it has the problem of technology of carbon capture, or CCS, is not so mature yet that there are still emissions released, and this is a problem if you want to reach net zero. But once the amount of CO2 that you have captured, it can be stored in the same sites of natural gas is taken. Okay, so in fact, in the oil companies, this is something that is already done. They inject kind of gases in order to push the oil push the oil out. So it's the same. It's more or less the same process. Okay, you have to include the first process of getting the CO2 from the chimney or from whatever. Okay, but then you may put it in pressure and storage it in the same places. The point is that there are limitations on where these sites, these appropriate sites are. There are no that kind of sites in everywhere. In Spain, for instance, I think we don't have so many. And there are some others.
Yeah. Another question. In the meantime, of course, participants can, I think the best way to send your questions is using the chat so that it's easier. We don't interrupt each other. You can send your questions by the chat, okay? I'm going to make more questions, but keep, in the meantime, prepare your questions on the chat, okay? What is the likelihood of this SDS curve, the Sustainable Development Scenario, the Paris Agreement? What is the likelihood of following that dotted curve you showed? Is there a percentage? I mean, that's the crystal ball. Nobody has a crystal ball, but...
No.
What's your?
I don't, at least.
Yeah. What's your impression? I mean, do you think we'll, without USA in the Paris Agreement, or?
Yes, the decision of USA of leaving the Paris Agreement was like a very bad news, and United Nations was very, very worried about this decision, especially if this may cause an effect, domino effect, and many other countries start to retire from this agreement. In that case, the global diplomacy in this climate change didn't work anymore. But luckily, it has happened the other way around. Recently, China has announced that they are going more ambitious commitment, and many other countries are on the way. And well, it's true that this is something that we will have to be faced, especially because with this Article 6, with carbon markets and carbon prices and these things start to be important, difficult rules for commercial between areas, and this is something that makes things a little bit harder. But well, luckily, even within the US, there are some areas, as California, for instance, that are taking other kind of decisions. How likely would be the SDGs scenario? Well, it's quite hard to say. With the UNFCCC, the commitments that the countries or included in the Paris Agreement, every 5 years, the countries needs to release a new set of commitments for each country.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this year, this 2020, it's one of these years, and countries are releasing their new commitments. And they are asked to increase their ambition time per time. Okay, so right now, this is the situation, but maybe with the new policies, we start to see improvement.
Thank you. Another $1 million question for you, Raquel, now that we have you with us. You know, electrical cars are getting mainframe. Prices are getting lower and lower. You can get the new e-Golf, which is the Volkswagen ID3. Is like the new Golf completely rethought for 30,000 euros. That's it begins to be affordable.
Yes.
What is your advice? Should we wait for the hydrogen car?
I think hydrogen still needs some time to be affordable. Right now, the most part of the plants, this Iberdrola hydrogen plant, for instance, that will be under operation next year, it's still like an example or a model, okay, to start to make market, okay, start to go down through the learning curve, and it's still expensive. Okay, so I think hydrogen is coming, but it's still going to take time, and probably this hydrogen will be used for long distance transportation, much more than for short distances or for people transportation.
Thank you. We have a question from Christian Bonfert. How I will read it for you, okay? How will the hydrogen be delivered from hydrogen plants to the user? In Iberdrola case, to the ammonia plant, I assume via pipeline. In this case, will existing gas pipe network be used?
Well, in this case, as I said, the hydrogen projects are still as prototypes. Well, are big ones, okay? But in this specific case of Iberdrola hydrogen plant to Fertiberia, both facilities are very close. In fact, well, the photovoltaic power plant is close to Fertiberia facilities, but the electrolyzer, it's inside the Fertiberia facilities. So it's direct with a pipe, yes. And in the future, when more and more hydrogen are available, this is a trending topic too. How is it going to be distributed? Is it going to be used the same oil, the same natural gas pipeline is going to be used for hydrogen? And I think it's under discussion. Hydrogen is still immature, a little bit immature. It's finally coming. It looks like it's finally coming, but it still takes time, especially to small users. Maybe for a specific industry, it has more sense. For the rest of the users, it would take longer.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see if we get more questions from the participants. Another question. I have lots of questions, but don't want to monopolize your attention. I mean, using hydrogen as batteries in the wind for wind power is that? I mean, that's also a possibility, right? To generate hydrogen from the wind. Yeah.
In the same way, yes. In the same way, for green hydrogen, what you need is electricity, no matter where it came from. Even if it came from oil, but it has no sense. The idea is to have clean hydrogen, and it doesn't matter if it came from onshore wind or offshore, even offshore wind. They are thinking on some companies are thinking on plans to produce green hydrogen from offshore plants. Well, no matter. In the end, what you need is electricity, and no matter it came from, where it came from.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Let's wait just one more minute to see if we get any more questions from the audience. Well, it's really a very hot topic, the one you have presented today, Raquel, because it's, I mean, everybody's talking about this. This is our future, the future of our planet, and yes. Well, you can see everybody is watching documentaries on Netflix or other platforms, just how climate is changing, and well, so we'd better act soon.
Yes, especially in the energy sector, because energy sector has the bigger figures related to the greenhouse gases emissions. So it is coming to us very directly. It's going to have a big impact. The climate policies are really focused on, well, they are also considering, of course, other things, but they are really focusing on the energy, and many changes are coming. We have to be prepared to start this path of change. It's taking long, okay? We are speaking about being neutral, Europe, because other countries now, by 2050, from now in 30 years. So it's going to take time. But we have to consider that this change is coming. The oil companies are seeing that, and well, they are suffering a lot. The COVID pandemic, oil demand reduction, or well, energy reduction in general, and oil companies are rethinking a little bit how are they going to manage their strategy in order to implement these changes that are coming.
Yeah. Christian Bonford is asking, can the presentation be shared with the audience? We will make this recording available for you for later, if you want to watch it again, or somebody who missed this live meeting. Regarding the PowerPoint slides, that's up to the speaker to share it with you. I don't know if Raquel would mind sharing can you?
Yes, I think so, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe we can leave the presentation here. Again, thanking Raquel for his wonderful presentation, and okay, we will please we encourage you to begin some discussion in the Telegram bot or the website, okay, of the Plant Engineering Workshop. Thank you very much, Raquel.
Thanks to you. Thanks to you. Bye. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.